One of our sort of standard issues here at the ACLJ, our fight against Planned Parenthood that has been going on for decades and decades. And of course, there has always been the conversation of what it would look like if the government defunded Planned Parenthood, stopped funding Planned Parenthood. It's been a campaign promise, I feel like, from multiple different presidents. One of the ones that has been one of the more difficult ones to actually get done. But now, thanks to the big, beautiful bill, whether you like it or not, I think everyone can kind of have an agree to disagree moments in every kind of bill like this. This is one of those positives, is that Planned Parenthood, at least for the next year or so, has been or will be defunded. But now Planned Parenthood has responded. And Jordan, I'm going to let you talk about this because Planned Parenthood has responded in the court.
Yeah, it's interesting. They say that they're going to be suing the Trump administration, of course, and going to court, but that it's an unlawful and targeted attack. Here's the thing I think that we've got to kind of remind people about the victories and how they've kind of built upon one another. So first, you overturn Roe versus Wade. That means that there is no federal right to an abortion, which means states can legislate on abortion. So it doesn't mean there's no abortion, but it sends it back to the states. And we've seen it basically a divide in the country, pretty even among partisan lines to some extent. Some states more extreme, some states less extreme. Then you had a Supreme Court case just last week come out and say that states don't have to fund abortion providers through their Medicaid funding, which that's the vast majority of Medicaid funding actually goes from the federal government to states to administer. And what this does is says through this funding bill and through this legislation, the states won't even have to make that decision because no money for this set period of time, and then Congress will have to come back, but for this set period of time, no money can flow through Medicaid to any abortion provider. So this is why for Planned Parenthood, we've talked about that's the $400 or $500 million a year that we've talked about being up against when we take on these kind of groups. But those victories upon victories and battling it out for years, they build up upon it.
Yeah. Will, why don't you break down a bit of what has been going on at Planned Parenthood, as Planned Parenthood has essentially said, no, we deserve funding. You can't cut our funding. It's our right to have the government fund us.
That's right. So Planned Parenthood has said to President Trump, we'll see you in court. They're going to file a lawsuit arguing that the defunding of Planned Parenthood through the Big Beautiful Bill is unlawful, as they call it, a targeted attack. It's going to be interesting, Jordan, to see what claims they make in this lawsuit, especially in light of the Supreme Court decision just about a week and a half ago, which paved the way, saying that Planned Parenthood couldn't sue states for excluding them from the Medicaid program. That's exactly what this kind of does on a federal scale, is that federal dollars through Medicaid can't be going to Planned Parenthood. At the same time, Planned Parenthood is calling this a backdoor abortion plan, which I think reveals a little bit of the whole game. Yeah, they're finally agreeing with us, but they're now arguing that that's why you can't defund them. So what do you think they're going to even try to argue in light of what the Supreme Court said at the state level? How are they going to try to wiggle their way out of that and say, well, federal level, this is clearly illegal and targeted?
Yes. So I think the argument is it's a targeted, focus on Planned Parenthood because they do also provide abortions. So they're going to have to make that argument in court, which they don't want to make in public, which is that none of this money is supposed to go, not a single dime, to go towards any abortion at all, any kind of abortion procedure, any facility at all that would actually do the abortion. So you've got to have some separation there. But when they're fundraising and when they're speaking to the press, it's all about they're defunding Planned Parenthood as a backdoor abortion ban. So what are they saying? Well, if you don't give Planned Parenthood money, you are defunding the abortion industry. And for so long, the argument that they would make to the American people and in Congress was, don't worry, if you oppose abortion, it's okay because that money's not going there. They've now switched their argument to, if you take away our money, you're taking away abortion. Now, some of that is where the debate has changed, but it's also the real clear admission of what we've been saying for 3 decades, which is that every dime that goes to Planned Parenthood is another dime towards abortion, and it's $500 million a year. And so that's why they're having to immediately take this kind of action. And I have to actually applaud the House Republicans who took this vote and the Senate Republicans who took this vote under some significant pressure, because we've seen the backlash against the pro-life movement in the states. And so when people say this bill,
it's not the most popular thing in a lot of states, and maybe you can even break that down to why this has always been one of those campaign promises that never can seem to be kept.
I think it's a lot of people don't like the idea that their money and their taxpayer dollars would go to provide abortion services. But then when we actually saw Roe versus Wade get overturned, and these were no longer ideas or theories that we would like to do, but they were actual, real, we could actually basically defund Planned Parenthood for real and see the impacts of that. There was a panic, and I think that the PR campaign run by the abortion industry was a lot more organized because they are trying to save a business. Whereas we're activists and interest groups, they are saving a over $1 billion a year business, and their business is abortion. They don't make money off of giving out birth control. They make money off of abortion procedures, whether that's being refunded by Medicaid, like $500 or $600 a time, or being paid out of pocket.
And look, I don't want to put any other organization like ours on blast, but also understand this. We've been fighting for this for 35 years. And when Roe versus Wade got overturned, we were very excited. When these things happen, we're very excited. These are positive movements. Now, of course, you have to be able to fight back. But you know what? A lot of other organizations, again, not going to name names, call names, they saw this as a panic moment for them as well. Because pro-life movement has been something they've been able to fundraise on for years and years and years. And what happens if there's no abortion? Then all of a sudden there's no campaigns. What are they going to do? Well, we said, and I sat in a room with our team and said, listen, we know this issue is going to be changing. How do we make sure that you are staying informed? Because it doesn't go away. Now, it has been hard to convince people, to explain to people that just because Roe versus Wade was overturned doesn't mean abortion doesn't exist. In fact, it does in maybe even a more extreme sense in different areas, different states. But that has been a learning curve that we've had to tell you and tell our audience and really learn ourselves of what the next chapter of this fight does look like. This is part of that. This is part of that in terms of defunding Planned Parenthood, getting involved in different ways and doing, whether it's our Massachusetts campaign, ways that you can go to those states that are never going to probably vote for a pro-life amendment, that are maybe going to make it even easier. Maybe they're going to use your taxpayer dollars to bring people in. How can we help in that sense? And that's why the ACLJ at ACLJ 35 right now, our 35th anniversary, it is about evolving. It is also about looking at how those issues that are always going to be core to us, but what do they look like for the next 35 years? What do they look like for the next generation that is going to be fed another group of lies? What's going to happen when there's another Democratic president, which will happen in our life, likely, if we're just going to look at time. Okay, it's flip-flopped. Our entire life, it has flip-flopped. So likely that will happen again. And what does that look like? You have to play the long game here.
Well, and I'll go to you, Jordan, on this as well.
I just think we need a revitalized pro-life movement, right? So we had the first phase of the pro-life movement was, can we ever overturn Roe versus Wade? Can we get to the point where we've educated people enough on the issue legally and publicly to where we're no longer going to have abortion without any restrictions at all? You know, it was completely unregulated. You couldn't even treat it like a ambulatory care center. It didn't have to meet those kind of standards, yet they were doing invasive operations. We saw the horrors that came out of a lot of the exposure that the Planned Parenthood received because of the way of new media access, because you got to cut through the mainstream media who was so in the pocket of Planned Parenthood. And then we saw the overturning of Roe versus Wade. We had Dobbs. And that's when you need round two. I said the fight was going to get harder because now we have to take it to states and educate people who in the past it was easy to say you're pro-life and basically say, oh, I'd love to take this action. Let's do this action. But you know either it wasn't going to get through Congress to a president's desk or it was going to be overturned by a court very early. And so it was a lot easier to say you were part of the cause when you weren't actually inflicting any pain on the abortion industry. And now that we are, we have to have a revitalized movement in our country which understands this fight is just beginning. It's the new round. It's a new round, and they've still got $1 billion in the bank.
And again, I mean, I saw people who were the most pro-life activists turn on it and say, you know, I was all for making abortion illegal until this happened, and now maybe I was wrong the whole time. And again, those people are fair weather and clearly are being controlled also by a pocketbook. They're not being controlled by actually convictions or issues or how they feel. And that's sad. But that's not what we do here. We go for the win. And I think the ACLJ has always done that. We're not just going to go for a case that we know we're going to lose and then we're going to put up a bunch of money. We're going to fundraise from you. We're going to ask you for a bunch of money when we know good and well that we're going to lose because you're in a court that's not going to, or you're not going to do this. There's all these different variables because we have smart people. It's not what we do here. We go for the win. We go for the win, whether it's good for fundraising or not. But that is why it's so important that we're here, and we're here because you bring us here. Of course, that is ACLJ supporters and ACLJ champions.
Well, and Jordan, I want to bring up one other thing as well, because what Planned Parenthood is arguing here is that we are entitled to federal dollars. Yeah. You cannot take away federal monies from Planned Parenthood. At the same time, and they're going to say it's discriminatory and all these things in their lawsuit, even though we have that win out of the Supreme Court. We know we'll have to engage that when it's filed, that the ACLJ will be writing a brief as well. But we also look at what we're fighting right now in Massachusetts, where pregnancy resource centers that get no federal dollars are being targeted by the Commonwealth and an abortion activist group that were running ads with taxpayer dollars to discriminate against them trying to provide care, not taking federal money, and yet we're having to fight that in court at the same time. I think it's a very jarring contrast of Planned Parenthood saying we are entitled to federal dollars, but in Massachusetts, the government can run an attack ad against a pregnancy resource center that's pro-life.
Yeah, I mean, the worst kind of precedent you could set in America is that we elect our leaders at all these different levels, and when they ultimately get to the level where they've appointed justices to the Supreme Court who decide that there's no federal right to this, and even if there was, is there a federal right to funding it? I mean, that's a totally different argument itself. And the issue was always, no, you can't actually force anyone to fund abortion. So Planned Parenthood used these accounting, they call it the backdoor abortion ban, because they don't want to admit that actually it's just an accounting practice. So the same facility that is providing abortion is also taking in the federal dollars and saying, well, this part of the facility doesn't provide abortions. No one is entitled to our taxpayer dollars. Every corporation that gets a grant, that gets, whether it's a military company doing the newest plane or jet, they have to bid for it. They have to have the best. And we know there are other options that are better than Planned Parenthood. Drive by a Planned Parenthood and look at some other community health centers, and you'd rather go to the other community health center than a Planned Parenthood.
We are so excited to announce the ACLJ's brand new app, completely redesigned to provide you with the best tools available to partner with us at the ACLJ. You can watch the daily Secular program, sign the petitions, customize your ACLJ membership experience, donate with the click of a button, and receive up-to-the-minute critical updates that the mainstream media can't censor. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to your phone's app store, search ACLJ, and click install. It's that simple.